Everyone in this industry, because of 20 years of indoctrination, doesn't really fully understand the impact of what's coming because it's so different.
Welcome to the Troxel Podcast. I'm Evan Troxel. A bit of housekeeping before introducing this episode. The Troxel Podcast and YouTube show are made possible by sponsorships, and I still have sponsorship slots open right now. If you'd like to get your product or service in front of this incredible, industry-changing and forward-thinking AEC tech audience, please visit trxl.co/sponsor to learn more and get in touch with me. And for you listeners, did you know that there's also an ad-free version of this show? You can support me directly by becoming a member. To learn more about membership, please visit trxl.co and click on one of the many subscribe buttons on the site, which will show you the details of what's included. There are a lot of things that I want to be able to do with Troxel, and that can only happen with your support through sponsorships and memberships. Okay. Picking up where we left off in the last episode, I'm pleased to release the second half of my marathon conversation with Martyn Day of X3DMedia, AEC Magazine, and the annual Next Build and Next Dev events. Martyn's a busy guy. So if you missed the last episode, you should pause here and go back to episode 133 before picking this one up. And like I said in the intro to the last episode, upon re-listening to this entire conversation, my belief was once again reinforced that podcasting is the perfect medium for this kind of long-form conversation to be captured and shared with everyone in the industry, which is exactly why I do this. In this part of the conversation, we delve into the disruptive impact of AI on architecture, Autodesk's response to the open letters, software licensing, open standards, pros and cons of AEC's shift to the cloud, the importance of BIM 2.0, challenges with technology moving too fast, prefab construction, the future of 2D drafting, challenges faced by software developers in the AEC space, the importance of customers being included during the software development cycle, digital twins, the problem with hype cycles in AEC tech, the future of Martyn's Next Build and Next Dev conferences, and other topics. Similarly to part one, many more companies and products were mentioned in this episode, including Autodesk Revit, Graphisoft ArchiCAD, Swap, Katera, Cope AI, Dassault Systems CATIA, Autodesk Inventor, Hypar, Autodesk Tandem, Autodesk Forge, Bentley MicroStation, TwinView, Archibus, Trimble SketchUp, and BricsCAD. So, fill out your bingo cards. I hope you enjoy the remainder of this conversation, and without further ado, I bring you Martyn Day.
A VC lady contacted me before we ran Dev, had a conversation with her, and it was pretty clear that maybe she didn't really know that much about the industry and was kind of learning. And so we had a half an hour call, not all came out of it. And then she contacted me after Dev and just said, okay, we're looking for firms that can remove architects. And I'm like, what? There isn't one piece of software that was demoed anywhere that could remove an architect. There is no such thing. You're still going to need people who've got indemnity. But you still need people to check everything. There is no way you can remove that entire. There might be fewer of them, but it's not necessarily. Oh, so this is the kind of the next kind of set of conceptual problems that we're going to be facing is the VCs are going to be looking to knock out part of the industry because they think that it's possible with AI. Yeah. So that, we can, in that industry, we can get rid of the lawyers. In that industry, we can get rid of the doctors.
Everybody wants to get rid of somebody. The architects want to get rid of the plan checkers, right? As an example.
Yeah. Well, and then with AI, everyone's thinking, "Oh my God, they're going to steal my designs." But at the same point, all the same companies are talking to me saying, "What we really want is an internal AI that learns from our designs, so that we can get rid of our people. We get rid of our people, not other people get rid of us." And I'm like, "Wow!" So everyone's going to AI each other. It's just like these big, huge whacking sticks at some point,
right?
I think at that point it becomes very difficult to predict the future because what it gets settled upon is nothing that we can possibly imagine at the moment. I've always used these in presentations where once the car engine came along and or the steam engine, someone designed the next generation of travel contraption, and it was a wagon with a horse with an engine in it. That whole kind of, I know the future's changing, but I can't change that much. So I'm just going to use all my old reference points to predict the future.
Together.
We're at that point where there's so many things that could happen. It was interesting that Andrew Anagnos went from at AEU, he'd be saying things like faster, less people. Yeah, three words, less with more, or something like that, which a lot of people took really badly because they just thought that he was doing them out of a job, and that wasn't what he intended at all. He was just talking about being able to do more projects, but with the same people, whatever. Then the next year, he started talking about AI and just said AI, any new technology that's come along has always created more jobs than it hasn't. And then this year, he was, not necessarily AU, but later through this year, he's kind of he changed his pitch a little bit to say this is on CNN or something on the business. He said something like, we're not saying it's not going to get rid of jobs, but we're just kind of saying that it's going to alter the way that you do your job, maybe more efficiently or whatever. And I think even Andrew's quite a big thinker, and I think that he's kind of changing his tone because it's happening so much quicker than we thought, and not in the way that we thought.
Right.
And it's painful in trying to keep up with it. And so when you see somebody like Tim Fu, so everybody's kind of like doing this stuff, and I saw Tim Fu video of him doing stuff. I was like, oh shit, this is like, he's completely symbiotically connected to this stuff where he can just model it at will. He's so good at what he does. You're going to have these individuals who are symbiotic with the technology, and it just acts as a perfect input suggestion. Here's a menu, here's a serving suggestion, and then he can model it, and then he can make the changes to it. There are going to be people who can do that, who are going to be augmented, because they're so damn skillful, basically. I always try to watch Andrew as a bellwether for what he thinks, and it's definitely gone a little bit more pointy that this stuff is going to make some considerable changes. There's a brilliant documentary called Capital in the 21st Century. If you've not watched it, it's available. You can rent it on Apple. It's a book, but they've made it into a documentary. But it starts off by saying, in the 18th century, if you were rich, your parents owned land, and the chances of anyone getting rich and owning land were very slim. And so it was a heritocracy. Then we had the 50s, World War II. Then we had kind of riches for the masses, for the middle class. Middle class can afford houses and all these things for their houses and all the gadgets and stuff like that. And then suddenly today we're in this weird world where it's turning into a heritocracy again, because kids can't afford to save money to buy a house, and they're relying on their parents owning a house to help them buy a house. You know what I mean? So I know this has got very little to do with behind the scenes. So that's the documentary start point. But sort of 3/4 of the way through, they start talking about AI. And this guy just says, in the Industrial Revolution, we had lots of horses. We had lots of horses. Horses everywhere. Once we had the steam engine, we didn't have any horses. Horses became an expensive thing as a pleasure that you had. They weren't workhorses. And he said that he then went on to go, AI, this is the first time that we've invented something that actually replaces humans. In this scenario, humans are the horses. He said 50% of all jobs I don't know if it was in the state he was in or if he was talking about the States, are driving jobs. in 10 years' time, all of those jobs are going to be massively under threat with automated driving, taxis, lorries, you name it. What are these people going to do? And that's going to happen worldwide. And that's going to, well, in the West, where they can afford the infrastructure and the costs. And that's very sobering when you sit there and think, yeah, there is we all try and think, oh my God, they're going after lawyers and doctors. But if these menial tasks for these like driving jobs, that's huge in itself. Let alone, shops and all the other kind of things that will happen. And it's going to creep up on our societies quicker than we've ever had to deal with anything like this before.
I think one of the things that you've talked about this event really like becoming a spark. And I think what I'm interested in now is momentum, right? Because obviously there's people working in firms who their job is to figure out what's next. And that is a new job when it comes to technology, I think, especially framing it this way, which is we want to dictate what we need the technology to do for us rather than just be somebody that the technology provider will come tap every so often, right? It's kind of flipping the table there. And so now there's going to be more emphasis on this. And I guess I'm just interested, you're talking about the next year's conference. You're talking about like it is going to grow, it is going to change, but building on what was presented this year. And I think such an important inflection point in the industry, right? The word is out, people are interested. You're talking about how many people are honing in on watching these videos. I wonder how many people are actually reading the new standard that's being developed, right, in the open. And I would imagine there's a lot of attention there, but how do we maintain that momentum? What are you doing at AEC Mag, to really help? Because you're the one who's kind of wrangled this whole thing together and created the platform for this to just happen. Not that you own it or author it or anything, but yeah, how do we maintain that?
So the bits were out there. All I did was extend Next Build really by an extra day and just invite a slightly different audience. And as you said, kind of do it the other way around. I want to get the industry to tell the software developers where their pain points are and what they need. And the moment I'm fed up of seeing software companies make up an idea, maybe get it checked by a small number of their customers, but their pet customers who might not necessarily be the best customers. Go to people who don't want your stuff, people who feel they don't want to buy any more software. And then, if you actually prove those people right that they want this technology, then you've got a surefire winner. And I kind of think that with the event, as it kind of came predominantly from an architectural side, but they were doing all the work. People were taking the piss out of the open letter group, but I actually did do some stuff that Autodesk did make changes to its licensing. People did get access to more past versions of the software. They did delay the end of network licenses for a while. There was a bunch of things that were beneficial to everybody. But we need to get construction and other disciplines on board, and we need to have those conversations. And they're happening. It's not necessarily through me. It's the Open Letter Group and Aaron and Andy having conversations with firms who really want to hear more. And then you've got Greg Schleusner with what he's doing with Magnetar and Strange Matter that he's working with his group. So that there's actual development going on there. So I think those are kind of the core elements of it at the moment. But to go to the next stage, I think we need to see software and proof of concepts that this stuff actually works, is possible to get there. And we need to see work in open standards, and we need to see more people on board with openness and more software vendors. Part of me doesn't want to believe Autodesk because I doubt always doubt first, but I have had so many conversations with so many people at Autodesk. I do fundamentally believe that there are people there who do think that they want to have a crack at being open APIs, open file formats. We're seeing it with USD, though it's not necessarily the same thing. The unified database that they're doing isn't going to be open, but the APIs allegedly will be. I mean, there is movement towards a little bit more than voices, and we're going to see some software. But I think for the event, I've got to keep finding new firms that are doing interesting things so that they're adding to it. We've got to dig deeper into this AI question, really beyond, I kind of see swap, but it just seems so much like a parlor trick. I mean, it's like, how is this working? This just seems insane. And I know that there are some firms in London that are trying it and piloting it. And I know that there's a lot more work than we'll just look at all the drawings and the AI knows. There is a lot of standardization that you have to try and tell it before it goes. So I know major signature architects are reaching out to them, even though the buildings that they themselves admit that they're looking at are very basically rectangles that are
right.
Boring architecture, but it's going to come.
Got to start somewhere.
Yeah, it will grow. It's got to start somewhere, and I'm expecting to see more people do that kind of stuff. The interesting thing is that historically, what would have happened if we had a new group of software tools coming to the market? There'd be plugins for Revit. These things aren't plugins for Revit. Nearly all of them are standalone cloud apps that will plug into Revit through APIs or through BIM 360 or whatever. And this is kind of like a change. So suddenly we're not seeing in the tech stack world where you'd have kind of like the foundation product and all the things plugging into like a porcupine and all the crap happening inside the software on your desktop. This is a new world, and all this stuff is in the cloud, and you're going to start sending your data, whether it be a model into the cloud to get all your 2D drawings back. It might happen seamlessly. You don't know what's going on. It's just, you press a button and all the APIs are talking about themselves, and then you get your it's ready. Here's your document set. We'll have to have AIs to check the AIs, because the one thing that's setting out the drawings, you're always going to need to have another set of eyeballs on something. And the way that an AI is programmed or trained, you want to have an AI that's got some slightly different training and some slightly different inputs to look at the outputs. You can't have the same piece of AI that created it checking it. So you're going to need that. I mean, data sets for AI are going to be incredibly painful, because nobody, I don't think, has ever produced 100% free documentation, 100% correct documentation. And that's why a lot of firms want to be in control of training their own AI, so that it's their own fault if it does that, but it's also they're in control of retraining it when it goes wrong, so as opposed to this global AI presence of what ISO drawings should look like. And every architect has their own idea about what their documentation should or shouldn't look like. So the good thing is the people who come to the show to typically have a pretty good grasp on the fact that change is constant, but we're heading for something. This is why BIM 2.0 is so important in my discussion, even though, I mean, I got to the slide in my talk and I was like, oh God, it's a whole lot of words. And it's, yeah, you can read it, but this is so important because we're not getting a next generation of the leading tool. And for all the reasons that Adagnos has stated, I completely agree with him. That he doesn't want to design a faster car. Yeah, but there are people developing faster cars. So there is going to be a group of people who will gravitate towards Revit as it is, but in a different form that's faster, that can handle stuff. There are going to be in that bottom segment. That's what they've trained to do. That's what they know. That's where they want to be. And I think there is going to be some fracturing there where people will gravitate towards that. But I think that the capabilities that you're going to be able to lock into on a cloud-based AI system are going to be so compelling, because you're going to have productivity benefits that they haven't dreamt of. But it doesn't mean that doing some projects in 2D or in BIM or traditional BIM isn't the right way to go about it. Maybe it's not a big amount of effort, but for big complex projects where you have lots of people working together and you need constant checking and there's lots of complication and there's analysis and there's all this stuff going on, then that's the way it's going to go. But again, people are going to be tempted to go to a one-size-fits-all shopping center of fun as opposed to pick the best in each. I think the whole database concept that Greg's come up with and is promoting is about having that ability where, as I've said before, we're no longer writing apps that sit on top of the design system. They're going to be sat in the cloud. Well, if we're now also taking an abstract and taking all of a project's data and putting that in a data lake, the applications can sit in the cloud and sit on top of that data. And they're not really sat on top of the data, they're just like called in through APIs. So suddenly you've kind of leveled the playing field and you've eliminated this problem of this bottleneck of this old bit of software that's quite slow, that has a kind of limited API, that has a limited capability of expressing the geometry that you want to do or containing the knowledge that you want to keep inside of it. It's mind expanding. The idea is this market is moving from a very constrained old-based system to something which is going to be unlimited capabilities, not just from Autodesk, but Autodesk knows it can't produce everything. So I'm sure they don't mind all these startups having their cloud applications where plugging into their APIs. I mean, it's as good for them as having it plugged into Revit, because wherever the data goes, Autodesk wants to own it or wants to contain it. They want to own the network. There's always the things owning the network is better than owning one application. I'm sure Autodesk will buy other applications, other tools, and you'll be able to do whatever. Maybe Autodesk will start licensing its cloud unit system. So, Autodesk don't have to buy you, but they can actually take care of the transaction for you in their network, where you can, because that's always a pain in the backside. That would be a danger, I would say, to also having Autodesk be the dollar, if you know, for the industry, the standard. But everyone in this industry, because of 20 years of indoctrination, doesn't really fully understand the impact of what's coming because it's so different. And this is the thing that I'm trying to get across in the magazine. Whenever I hear people kind of like saying, "Oh, is Revit dead?" or it just makes me laugh that is even a consideration that needs to be discussed. Because I'm 5 to 10 years out in my head, and I'm talking to these guys who also have a very non-product centric. They have products, but their products are more services than their products. That's the other thing you've got to change your mindset around. But they all want to do subscription. It's all going to be, how is all this stuff going to get costed out for projects? Just simple things. I remember asking Graphisoft. So Graphisoft introduced this very internal. It was called Everest, and it was that was the code name. It was sort of like a new pipeline for data, and they used it to get data from ArchiCAD to their own in-house NoCheck structural engineering programs. So it meant that the architect and the structural engineer pretty much always were in sync. And so you have just changed the model. structural engineer will go, oh, I'll just have a look at it. Yeah, you can do that. That's fine. And it's kind of simultaneous access. But the thing I was convinced was like, so this is really great in terms of productivity because architect can make every change and they can check it with a structural engineer. But that isn't the way it works. It's you expect the structural engineer to actually stop doing what he's doing on something else and come and check your one change on your model, say, yeah, that's okay, and then go back to something else. The transactions just don't work like that. And while you can introduce a technology that seemingly increases productivity and gets this kind of almost like they're working under your own roof, that isn't how things can work.
No.
It's just, give me all your changes, and 2 weeks I'll have a look. I don't want to see the fact that you've altered the slab today.
Well, not only that, but when you're doing the process, you break stuff because you have to, and you don't need everybody to be commenting on the stuff you broke until you put it back together again, right?
There is a natural cycle. There is a natural time between changes and oversight that I just don't think. And this is another thing. I was talking to somebody, so they were telling me that they really went from being kind of like BIM users to let's do this sort of DP. What's the Americans did it a lot as well.
Yeah, it's integrated project delivery, IPD.
IPD, which was kind of like, that's interesting. The software requires us to change the way we work. That's a bit of an issue. So I was talking to this guy and he said, well, we got everyone together and we were like going gangbusters on this project. And we were like, we were absolutely nailing it. We put the design cycle all down. We had the MEP, the structural, the architect, all in the same space. We got to it. We went to the client. The client went, love it, go with it. Off they go. They'd ordered the steel to be cut. 2 months later, client comes back. I want an atrium. So it's kind of like, are we going to get to a point where the AI designs a building so quickly that the client doesn't have time to even digest the design enough to dwell on it, to want to actually not have other ideas? I mean, they're bad enough as it is, but
it opens up a whole other set of problems because, I mean, clients don't speak the building vocabulary as it is. They don't speak plans. They don't speak elevations. They don't speak sections. And so therefore, we always default back to renderings and now real-time rendering and sometimes VR and, more visual ways to communicate. But to your point about digesting, like we speak fluent buildings. That's what we do.
Yeah.
We're industry professionals. They don't do that maybe once a decade. It's like, how often does that happen? And so, there's other bottlenecks that this is going to just put on a pedestal.
And it's not that it's being unique to AI. So that was BIM, let alone AI with it designing it in 40 minutes or however long. Like let's say just be generous and have a week with all the drawings. And the guy goes, fine, we're going to order the metal because the next thing is that all the metal are being cut for this building, so they have to trash it all. But I remember I went to Berlin. So the Reichstag building had been completely stripped back, and I had a fantastic opportunity to walk around the Reichstag with Foster and Partners to have a look at you could see the burn marks from Hitler. You could see all the bullet holes and all the Russian graffiti that was, well hidden up in the building. And they said, so they'd won this competition. Foster and Partners had won a competition to rebuild the Reichstag. The building went in, they won the competition. They then went off and did all the detailed drawings. We're progressing down towards, obviously we're going to be building this. And then the German parliament took a vote to see if they wanted to add a dome to the building. And they did. So then the entire design had to change, even the one that they'd won. And clients change their mind and are fluid. And I think even to this day, Foster and Partners always try and keep the projects in Rhino for as long as possible in case of any sudden changes that are required before they go into drawings. But I've come across this far too often for technology is definitely going to challenge our process, our capability to rationalize what this means. And for clients, it's going to be the same. They need time to digest whatever it is you're putting in front of them, and they're going to want to dwell on it. And compressed design and fabrication timelines doesn't really work. If I think there's going to be a kind of the limitation is going to be in the decision making of the client as to the timeline, as opposed to, well, God, we're waiting for all this stuff to get done.
But from an architectural design standpoint, that can be backfilled with more projects. I mean, I feel like, yeah, you can still allow a client to sit with something for a while, and you're doing a bunch of other stuff, especially if it's been compressed down to 40 minutes, like you're talking about. And what I would actually hope is that, and this is a theory that I've just kind of been bouncing around in my head, but could this lead to architecture costing less to produce? And that doesn't need to spell the end for the architect. If the architect can do more for less, and we can build more architecture, like real architecture, not just dumb rectangles, I think that there are potentially benefits there. But is anybody ready for any of that? Because it is a total paradigm shift in the way that everybody works.
I think there's a finite number of individuals who want those kind of jobs. And yes, there are too few architects at the moment, but architects plus AI will more than meet that need. The issue then will be, why should someone pick you over someone else? If architects are so to a penny, I mean, and how many buildings are you never going to get to build because you never have, you're going to have most architectural practices will have sort of like it's going to be, you're going to be giving a pair of goggles to your client to see the buildings you've designed but never built. The buildings you've designed to one-to-one detail are ready for fabrication that were never built because you could, and that's what the technology allowed you to do. I don't know. I think there's yes, there's the potential, always the potential for doing more work, and the question is what you're into and what level you're doing. If that means you can do more garages and more house extensions, I don't think that's, if you're a mid-sized practice and it means that you can be doing more office buildings, I don't think we're going to need office buildings. So might be more hotels, more free time. But then you have to look at what rectangles. I think the biggest change is going to be in boring buildings that get reproduced time and time again. I think if somebody at some point is going to come up with the Volkswagen Beetle of houses, and everyone's going to want one, and that's when you get interesting, because then you can have a factory. You can't really have a factory for much else. If you're making rectangular boxes that ship volumetric, that ship on the back of a lorry and get hoisted into make a rectangular short-term building or whatever, okay, fine. The thing that worries me is the quality of the materials and how long those buildings are going to last for. Are they really greener if you're ripping down a building after 20 years? So the thing that worried me the most, so when I did a bit of, one of my summer researches was looking at the prefabrication volumetric market. In Japan, most houses outside of Tokyo are prefabs. And in Japan, house prices go down over time. The land stays the same value, but the value of the building, Japanese people do not look after those buildings because they don't think there's any need to, because it's going to get ripped down. You go and you buy a house, you expect to rip that house down and put a new one up on it. This worries me about modern construction, or whatever you want to call it, is that we're going to end up building houses that hopefully they'll be greener. Maybe even if you rip them down after 25 years, the materials will just be in a carbon sink somewhere. But everyone I've talked to who's got these sort of off-site fabrication plants and building things, they'll give you a 10-year warranty on it, and that's it. I mean, this is in the UK, modular has a bad name and prefab has a bad name. It kind of makes you think that it might be sort of like temporary. That's kind of a hangover from the war when we built a whole load of temporary houses, which were still being used 20 years ago, up to 20 years ago. And so, all it's going to take is for some of these houses to get sold, and then in 10 years' time, they'll get a bad name for themselves, and then people aren't going to want them. And housing decisions and housing, I think it's very quick to swap to volumetric, but then if it goes wrong, and it goes wrong widely, then you're talking about a lot of people with a lot of mortgage pain on a house. So we don't really have many timber frame houses in the UK. I'm always amazed in the States, timber frame houses. You build our houses from the inside out. In the UK and Europe, we build our houses from the outside in. We do the outside first, wait for it to dry off, then go in and do the finish. In America, it's all stick frame. Timber frame in the UK, if you want a mortgage for timber frame, it's in the same section as Japanese knotweed, subsidence, and listed buildings. It's deemed to be a non-standard construction methodology, and so it's harder to get a mortgage for a timber frame building than one of brick and block. So we've got some intriguing issues to deal with. Same in Germany, where most Germans want to have a house made of stone. They don't want to have a timber frame house. Switzerland are much more kind of wood-centric, not the Nordics are. So it's a different kind of space. We had Grenfell catch fire, so we got very scared about wood. So we had this wonderful material, compressed laminate, which was banned from being used on the outside of buildings. So that suddenly changed what we could do with it. We couldn't run in the whole kind of like mass timber movement. And I just think that there's this materials and offsite construction and how we make changes and appetites for that, and then long-term issues. If these things don't work, and if they're renowned for failure, then I'm just looking at the Japanese context of it, that the Japanese, you see these beautiful Japanese buildings that are 2,000 years old or whatever, and you think, oh my God, it's made out of wood, and it's stood the test of time. But their modern day housing is deemed as disposable.
Disposable.
So a Japanese firm invested really heavily in one of the kind of prefab startups here, which it was a really good modern architectural practice that did a lot of refurb work, but they set up a fab shop, and they went out of business within 18 months. A lot of people don't quite know how this works, but it's worth looking at that debate at Next Dev, where you've got Bruce from Facet Hounds. Bruce is brilliant. He's been making off-site construction wood houses for 15 plus years. He knows what he's doing. And then we had someone from we had Richard Harper, who used to be at Katera. So we had Charlie from DPR, and then there was Oliver from Cope AI. Cope AI got a very interesting software technology, which kind of, you're designing something, they'll find you a fabricator to try and build that in a modular way. But that conversation is gold dust, because you've got people who know about failure, and you've got someone who's getting it done, and someone who's trying to sell a middle platform to the industry to try and connect customers with fabricators. But it's my excitement. I was massively into offsite construction, and then they all started failing, and it was every couple of months one would go bust. And then Barclay Homes was my one great hope, who had set up a big kind because they were their own customer. They make their own houses, and then I think again huge losses. They weren't really talking about what they were doing. And when that whole thing goes dark, you just sat there going, "This isn't looking good." But it might be a British thing. It might be American. Poland and Italy have some thriving offsite construction market. Maybe also Italy, Israel. I know Israel are doing, the Israeli Defense Force are doing quite a lot in that as well. But yeah, there's a big market. Someone's going to nail it with something, but it's all this money's been poured into. That's the thing. There's been money in construction's been poured into the kind of like project planning, project maintenance, or construction, offsite construction, and the offsite construction seems to have been a very bad bet. Thinking about all the money that could have been spent on software development that went into the toilet and that amount. I mean, Katera was $2 billion, I think, wasn't it? It was it was painful. My favorite little story with that, I went over to Las Vegas for an event where Katera were, and I met Michael Marks, and they were showing me what they were building, and he was showing me around. He goes, "Oh, see the light bulbs in this building? Yeah, we own the company that does that." And I'm like, "What?" He wanted to own the entire chain of everything. And there was a special light bulb company that did they weren't just light bulbs, they were light bulbs plus Wi-Fi. So they were using the power grid of the building plus the light bulbs to somehow transmit Wi-Fi. But the thing that just absolutely floored me was they were shipping buildings from Arizona to Utah. And when they arrived in Utah, or sort of like fabricated, put in place, the buildings code inspector would go around to the building and then rip the front of the interior wall off, because they needed to know that the electrical and the pipe work that was already built in the factory was built to code, to Utah's code, not to Arizona's code. So every place these things were shipped, it's the equivalent of you buying a Ford and driving from one state to the next one and saying, "Stop, we've got to check the wiring loom on your car because it might not conform to our standards." And
welcome to California. Yeah, that's what they do with the smog equipment. Yeah,
really?
Sure that. Oh yeah.
But they were doing it with buildings, and I just thought, this is just stupid. And talked to other people. Oh, lo and behold, in Australia, it's exactly the same thing. So volumetric buildings were being built in China. They were being shipped to Australia, and this company had to install video cameras on the assembly lines so that every single one could watch the wiring and the plumbing be installed. And they got some kind of special deal where, as long as they could, see that was matched the barcode or whatever it is, then they wouldn't rip it apart.
Wow!
But that kind of almost killed my love of offsite construction, because you suddenly realize that it's just not geared up. We're not geared up for it. We had these stupid rules, or they were not stupid. They're not stupid for what they are, but in a modern twist, they actually mean you actually cause destruction to the thing you just built. And in the UK, we don't really have that per se. But what we have is British people like stone, and so if you're going to have offsite construction, if it is timber, then you're probably going to have to clad it in something that looks like stone, or you're going to have some kind of like metal, aluminium facade, which is holding all the stuff, thinners, and eventually that stuff's going to wear off at some point. So
it's cheap. Yeah,
it's cheap, and this is I don't like the idea of people doing offsite construction to make cheap, and there is always going to be one of the targets is to do it faster with less expensive materials, and So yeah, you won't be finding me buying a modular house.
Not yet.
Not yet. No,
Right.
we need to do some thinking about it. But yeah. So
Yeah.
that was another key point.
Well, there's so many things pulling at this industry. I mean, it's a miracle that anything happens at all. That's come up quite a few times on the podcast. It's just how do things actually get built? How do we actually get stuff built? And it is incredible, and yet here we are. The struggle is real.
I know, but sometimes the technology helps, and sometimes it just gets in the way, and sometimes the methodology that we instill in in the company and a workflow it just doesn't suit every single project. Yeah, this is the one hammer that you've got that you go and do, and so yeah, I'm starting to think that 2D wasn't so bad. And in some instances,
We do
instances, that's
long
good enough.
back. Yeah, go back to I long for the days where it was that simple, right? It's like thinking about the 50s, and it's just like, man, they had great. They just had it so good they didn't even know, and look what progress has brought us.
Now you've got to think about every single wall element, and having you model the walls correctly with enough
Right.
elements in them.
Right.
And I do believe that BIM, as it's in the best way of implementing it and running it, does produce some inefficiency to other traditional workflows. And sometimes I think you need to choose which projects deserve, so take Zamos, for instance. Zamos has CATIA. So they have every bit of software under the sun, but they have CATIA. CATIA is Dassault System software. It's used to design Boeings, Ferraris, cars, satellites. It can handle really large models. It can also handle really large, complex models, and it can spin them around in real time. It's one of the top end systems.
Mm-hmm.
And the thought that even in manufacturing, that is sometimes not necessary. It's overkill. You can do it with a cheaper package, or sometimes you can just draw it. Drawings have not disappeared from automotive or aerospace. For every single plane, they still produce full sets of drawings. For every single car, there's a full set of drawings. Part of it is a legal requirement, which isn't going to escape AEC. I don't see 2D drawings disappearing, but they could be better automated. Nobody in manufacturing spends time laboring over 2D drawings. They are an automatic output. And there's this guy called Dale Sinclair. Dale was at AECOM, and he's at WSP, and we were having a conversation about automation, and at AECOM he was literally throwing out Revit and using Inventor instead, because he wanted to do one-to-one. He wanted to have extreme detail, and he wanted to handle that onto the people who were fabricating it. And I think he's kind of taken that mentality with him when he went to do WSP as well. And so I think you're going to find more architects, or some architectural firms, more engineering-based architects than architects with a big A, opting to use manufacturing CAD tools, because their output, as they intend it to be, is one-to-one fabrication. And he was telling me that on some projects already, so he's got one architect working on the project, they're handling facades and spaces. Everyone else on the project's an engineer, because the prime directive is fabrication. And you're going to see some of that as well. And, as I was saying before, with high power and DPR, working on that system where they can conceptualize and literally go from concept to one-to-one fabrication by replacing just like quickly drawn dumb walls with whatever real world objects they've got in their library. These construction firms are going to compete on a number of projects that they won't have to hire architectural firms. They'll have a few in-house architects to take care of the niceties to make sure that the building looks vaguely okay. But it's really all about how quickly can they get it up, how cheaply can they fabricate it, how can they sequence it so it arrives on site, how they can beat their contracts so that they don't get penalized. This is another thing that's going to come to the market, and those buildings are, as I was told, with the bread and butter of most signature architects. Signature architects are well known for the individual buildings that that have these people's names on it, but they do a whole load of relatively uninteresting buildings for people who want to have a signature architect's name on it, but don't necessarily want to pay the full whack to have Sir Norman Foster's name on it or whatever. So that's a challenge for the industry. So yeah, I think every firm has to start thinking about it. So what are you seeing in the States? What kind of changes are you seeing in people's attitudes towards their tool vendors and their tools? Do they feel the stagnation?
I think, a lot of what I was seeing in the Next Dev presentations is exactly what we're seeing here. And I think you stated it earlier, where there's a hesitancy to say things out loud, but then in the meeting rooms, you're hearing exactly the same things. And I think a lot of firms have always kind of approached this as like, this is just us, we're the only ones seeing this. And then you get into these rooms where there are 50 other firms represented, and it's like everyone's raising their hand and saying the exact same things. They're building the same tools, they have the same complaints, they have the same aspirations, they're worried about the same problems. And I think that it's pretty much just industry wide. It's not just location based, like what you're asking about. It really is like kind of a global sense is the sense that I get from all of that.
It's interesting because I think when Andrew Ananos got the job, and I've known him for ages since he was in the mechanical CAD side of things. I knew Amar very well as well. So I think I had an interview with him probably within a month of him getting the job. And I just said to him, Andrew, there's a value problem that needs addressing, because all these architects are paying good money for this product that doesn't have any development velocity, and they're deeply frustrated with it. And he said to me, he's on the call, he said, you can look it up on AEC magazine. He said something along the lines of, give me a year. And I went, okay. So then I think I gave him 3 years. And then what he actually managed to do was totally denude development of architecture and stick all the money in construction and engineer, sort of MEP side of things, which wasn't what I was expecting. And obviously you saw all this big money in acquisitions for all the components, which became ACC and BIM 360 and all that kind of stuff. And it compounded a problem that then ignited with people who, fanboys who were really, really pissed off. That was the kind of bottom line of where it went. And I think that all these firms were talking to firms in the States and were getting similar kind of feedback as to what they felt, but they were really unwilling to sign the letter, and they were really unwilling to raise the issue so much. And when I raised it again with Anagnost at AU, I just talked to one of their largest customers, and they kind of said their EBA agreement was really painful. And I went downstairs to the press conference and I said, Andrew, why are people complaining about their EBA agreements being so expensive? And it was the time of Trump had just got in, and he turned to me and went, false news. But he was doing it in a joking way. I know he wasn't doing it for anything else. And I had a meeting with him afterwards. And I actually do believe, he said, no one says that to me when I go to any of these firms. And I said, I completely believe you, because you are the head of Autodesk, and these people want a good political relationship with you. They want to get their deals. They want to get their, and they're not going to specifically, torpedo that if they've already got, these people have had years and years of discounts, and they don't want to lose those and special deals or whatever for, oh yeah, you can run maybe that old version of software. Don't tell anybody. And I kind of think that it really struck them very hard that they didn't realize this was happening. And I spoke to the account manager of AECom, the Autodesk account manager, and he had no clue that people were saying this, but not to him. Absolutely. I honestly do believe that they were completely blindsided by it, which is strange. And when you've got a hierarchical top, then you've got this sort of sales group internally who then go through either distribution or direct to resellers. Resellers go on to customers. It's kind of like, you can imagine if there is any kind of like people complaining, there's plenty of points for it to be filtered out before it gets to the top.
Absolutely.
But I know they're now particularly aware of the problems that they could have. I just don't know if it's ingrained in the company to change
to
that
address
much
it,
in terms of, because you have shareholders, and the one thing I have been very impressed with is the tandem development, and it's not just Autodesk. Digital twins, I get it. I think a lot of people get it, but digital twins, I fear, is really just CAFM market with a better name. And the CAFM market is not very big. And I think all this stuff is being developed to an audience that, it works in 2D. What's the benefit of a BIM model over the way that we do CFM today? I have this nagging feeling. But the way that they set about developing it, I think is exemplary, because they realized they needed to get Revit data in a thinner format for post use. The first thing they realized is the database of Revit is ridiculously too big for what they need. So they came up with a new format that was lightweight, brilliant. Then every month they have engaged customers with this. If they've got a new feature they want to show people, they don't just show it to people, but they have like polls. So people who've actually spent their time invested watching it can kind of give feedback on how features should work, features capabilities. If they don't have any new features to show, then they'll have a kind of a general conversation presentation piece talking about digital twins or an element of it. But everyone I've sat in on, you can see the progression of this piece of software, and you feel actually part of the development process because you're actually giving feedback. If you could be asked to sit online and just have 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and I kind of think this is a brilliant new way to develop software with this level of ongoing engagement in our cloud connected world, other than somebody being sat in a room somewhere for 18 months and coming out and going, look what I've done. This I think Forge has enabled this, and I think the attitude to development and being open about it and not fearing showing people too much. And I think that's a thing that's probably changed for good now, is that software developers are being much more using the tools of the cloud and the web and everything to get early engagement and to be open. beforehand, none of these software developers wouldn't show it to you until they were happy with, phase one or whatever it is they've got. And we're in this new space where you can be part of the development, and you can keep an eye on something you're interested in. And if you are, you can, I'm sure they've got beta programs on top of this as well going. But it's a new way of software coming to the market. And at the moment, Tandem, it was like really bare bones. I mean, the first time I saw it, I thought, is that it? Really, it's like a really good Revit viewing tool. I don't know how long it's been going, 2 years. It really has notched up a really good level of technology. And I think there was a lot of other work that was being done in Switzerland by one of the developers, and they've finally taken that technology and they could fold it in, so they could make really big jumps because they had all this stuff, years of development work. So I kind of think that Autodesk doesn't have to look too far if he wants to try and find a better way of software development.
It's right there.
It's there. And I think Bob Gray has done a great job of showing how software can be developed now with these kind of fundamental platforms that everybody's using. But yeah, digital twin, that's kind of like it's the thing that Bentley are trying to, Bentley's biggest element is this market, but they play to these huge Fortune 500 companies that, they do have oil people, they do have Army Corps of Engineers, they do have really big players. And I think that it makes more sense to a Shell or whoever to manage all these different facilities. Still I just don't know where that market is for that entry point. If you were really into BIM and you understand BIM and you think this is fantastic, we can leverage it. There's a brilliant company in the UK called Space, which are architects. They have software developers. They developed it called TwinView, which is a really good Revit facilities management tool. And just listening to them, how they've had to try and sell it, and you think that it'd be a no-brainer because that we believe in digital twins, and they had to go down to London and they had to find financial institutions who owned lots of buildings, and they were very interested in it because they were commoditizing those buildings as shares or stocks or an equity investment. And they, for some FTC financial rule, they had to prove those buildings were being run incredibly well, super efficient, so that they could qualify for some kind of green investment. That is a failure of digital twins. If it's come down to that, are the people who get it and want to buy it, it shows you there is a disconnect between the actual proposed users and the people selling it. And I had one of my speakers, Sarah Surgener, who spoke on Next Build and Next Up the following day. She said she worked for a couple of IES, and she said they were finding exactly the same. The people who get it are financial institutions. There's a huge market out there that is just not ready, doesn't understand what on earth it's doing. I find that kind of disappointing.
Well, and the people who are buying buildings and building buildings, the owners aren't often, from an architectural standpoint, it's just what's the first cost. They don't even have a budget for maintenance a lot of times, let alone a full-on technically savvy facilities maintenance group that is going to do the types of things that digital twin is going to enable somebody to do. They're not going to be running tests. They're not going to be checking every sensor every day. They're not looking for ways to optimize they're just trying to get along. They're just trying to do the best they can do, which is usually like one custodian for an entire campus, right? So it's a solution looking for a problem still for a lot of people. And to your point, it's only
think
for serial builders who are really going to be able to take advantage of it.
In 2013, 2014, I remember talking to Carl Bass, and I asked him, I said, so back in the day, with AutoCAD and Architectural Desktop and all that stuff, Autodesk went out and literally acquired the vertical market best players for, there was one for architecture, there was one for mechanical CAD, there was one for, whatever, process plant. You went and bought them. The one area you didn't buy in was CAFM. There was Archibus, and there were about 2 or 3. And I said, why didn't you ever buy in CAFM? And he just said, well, we could never really find the people who had the budget. And the budget they did have, if we found anyone, was very small. And it was just too tough a market to actually, it was probably too small for them to bother with. And I said, well, why are you developing, BIM, digital twin? Like, it probably wasn't the term at the time. And he goes, someone in the company seems to think that there's a market there, and it's their funeral. They can go off and develop it and see if it, they made a good enough case that, okay, here's the money, go and develop it. And I don't think I think this is way before Tandem. Tandem didn't really well. Could have been Tandem. I don't know. I don't know how it's to gestate. I think they're only working on it sort of from COVID onwards. So this might be something else. But and then that was just interesting to think that historically Autodesk didn't see the market, couldn't find the market, and now there's a lot of people talking about it, and they put the money into it. So, and they do have a lot. The people there, loads and loads of questions, really good questions from people on these sessions. We're making requests for capabilities and stuff. So I just don't know who they are. Are they facilities managers, or are they architects hoping to have another new business of, hey, we've built this building for you. Well, now we can manage your facility or help manage your facilities, and you can pay us some money. It seems to make perfect sense, but it just hasn't really been. I get high on the hype, and then I'll go and talk to somebody and just go, I'll stop promoting it. I have to wait till there is a really good case for this. But hype cycles are always a problem. And that's from Keith Bentley. So with MicroStation, the foundation for everything, the single thing they do, and then they brought out MicroStation J, which was MicroStation with Java. And I remember talking to him and just, and I said, so, is this a really big thing? Is like Java going to be huge? Because he's a programmer, obviously he said, yeah, it's fantastic. And I said, well, what happens if the rest of the market doesn't really agree with you? And he goes, well, we'll just look back behind us after leaving the charge and find ourselves on our own. And he was, because that whole thing didn't really. We always have to be aware that when you speak to people at technology firms who are involved in the technology, when they lead the charge because they think it's a great idea, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right direction to be charging in. You're going to leave your people behind. But especially, I think, sort of computer, Java, you're talking about open. I mean, the whole industry talked about openness for adding to an item when none of them were open. It was just really embarrassing. I mean, these things come and go, and they don't. Autodesk, Windows Objects Web, it was the biggest thing when they went from DOS to Windows. And what they ended up doing was, with objects, was knackering the DWG file. Because you used to, I don't know if you remember, but you used to be able to give someone a DWG and they could always open it. And then when ARX came about, the actual intelligence could actually sit somewhere else. So you handed someone a DWG where there would be either a blank hole where the object was, or after time they kind of fixed it and they created a zombie object. So you had some kind of like geometry you couldn't touch. That was created by something you don't know. It just, the whole idea of having a file format that everyone could see just got absolutely broken apart. So you always have to be very aware that the technology that you're being shown might not necessarily survive impact with reality. So it's always people always talk about successes and big software that has dominated, but very few people remember the failures. And I'm a massive history fan, and I think it's always important to remember what didn't work, as well as the ones that did work, because you feel history has a tendency to repeat, and so does software errors, business decisions with software. That's the one thing that I guess I bring is a certain element of negativity, because I'm like going, oh, why did that screw up last time? Does that really work with that? Trying to see, because I've been in the market for too long, basically, and I'm always learning. We're always doing that. The Autodesk license changes is a constant learning opportunity to learn, and then to try and find out what does it mean to every customer. Every customer with a license change, they've got different software. I think Anagnost even said so he gives a talk every quarter to the Wall Street analysts, and in one of them he said, "Oh yeah, our customers are in license hell, nightmare license land, or something like that," because they all had different software on different. They were managing software on different licenses internally, and so how on earth were customers ever supposed to kind of work out what license goes where? And I think the one thing that Autodesk doesn't do very well is management software. I think they always had problems with document management. Maybe they fixed that now in BIM 360, but they created some management tools so you could buy software for more than you had it for like a premium license for software tools that help you manage the licenses. But they did such a poor job of it that they ended up withdrawing them or giving them to everybody. And I was talking to one of the letter writers guys who was just like, the pro license, that was one of the big elements of this kind of pro license, but it didn't give them what they needed to try and track and trace software licenses to make sure that they couldn't go into non-compliance. And then again, when you go into this whole kind of like single sign-on, and you literally have to have a copy of every software for everybody you've got. That person must sign on one machine, and you can't have another person use that machine to confuse it. So you can fall foul of non-compliance by having the wrong person on a machine with a sign-in or a login for the wrong software license, because that machine is named user license. I mean, these kind of things create an awful environment for the design IT directors to try and manage. And they're spending more time managing those licenses because of the downside of the non-compliance possibilities. And literally every design IT director I talk to, bar one, has to do billable hours on projects. And so the more they get overloaded with management of licenses, because your licensing system's crap, but your non-compliance isn't, it's fully on it. You're not really going to be winning friends over when they've got that hanging over them.
Right.
I don't know. I don't really think that it was the one thing that in the original open letter that I guess didn't really address. It wasn't mentioned again. It was brought up. I think Aaron again was the guy who gave was the front to Autodesk execs to have that discussion, so you can imagine how that would have gone in terms of logic. So yeah, I think there's it's a complex world that we live in, but I think my biggest worry is that a lot of people don't really realize what's coming. I don't blame them, because they spend all their time just getting their job done, trying to do their job on their desktop machines, managing the licenses they've got, and change doesn't tend to happen that fast in our industry, and it's accelerating.
Yeah, I think one of the themes that I think of is that AEC is in chaos, and there's a huge wave of chaos that's about to hit, and that it's like we can't even get our head above the current chaos water to see what's actually coming. And so I wonder how this is going to play out. I mean, being in the position that you're in, kind of on the sidelines, looking at all of it, all of the landscape, it's never a dull moment, right? Like you're saying, there's going to be plenty of things to talk about, to write about, to invite to speak to at the conference, to the issues of the day. There's a lot going on. So pop some popcorn. I mean, it's interesting for sure.
It's like I've never, for the last couple of years, I've never been at a spare end thinking, what am I going to stick in the magazine this month? It's the great thing is having the resource of being able to speak to these design IT directors and hear directly from them what they've got, literally stuff coming at them 24/7, and someone's going to change their business model or implement. I think at one point we had SketchUp and Trimble playing funny buggers with SketchUp licensing costs and changes, and that had massive implications for, you have a product that literally is on everybody's desktop, and then suddenly it immediately jumps up in price. And by the way, we're switching off your design server. What? And then I ring around and I find, that's happening everywhere. 5 or 6 people. This is a problem. So I ring them up, and then we have a conversation with the VP of AEC, and we see if they know what they're doing. Is this what you intended? Because you've caused people to panic, and the first thing they're thinking about is throwing out your product. So what do you want to do? And I just don't. This is this greed that comes. I mean, I guess I'm a pretty bad capitalist. Is my bottom line. I don't believe everything should be free. I don't have that mentality, but I don't believe the stock market or shareholders should be the sole beneficiaries of software development. And software companies overestimate the value of their software to their customers frequently. And this is still this thing of, I watch one company, this leading company, literally grope its way to squeeze the lemon harder, which seems like a great idea. And, I'm sure internally the company, it goes down well, but it just really doesn't play. I get to hear the people back, doesn't play very well. I mean, I had a phone conversation with a head of pricing modeling, rang me up from Autodesk, and we were having a conversation. He goes, I've got some great news for the customers. I'm like, all right, okay, get my notebook ready, because I'm going to absorb whatever is going to happen. And the great news was that network licenses were being taken away, and you had to move from perpetual to subscription. And it was just like, where's the good news in this? This just really just seems like pain, and more pain. And there's no way of spinning. We're going to take more money from our customers for something else, for no real benefit. And that's why there's a lot of people, I think, in this industry could give feedback on licensing models, but I just don't know if the people on the other end want to hear.
Well, and a lot of times they're talking to those middleman, license managing companies, right? And not the creator of the software themselves. And even if they are, they're talking to somebody in that company who has no say in the whole process. Like you said, there's so many ways, so many places along the line of communications where things tend to fall off the story, so that that message never makes it to where it needs to land.
Well, I guess in large companies, you might have somebody who's handling that relationship. And I definitely have heard of stories where someone in the company is handling that liaison. They're coming into the next EBA agreement. Autodesk says it's 50% more this year. And then that person then goes to the board and says it's 50% more this year. And then they decide how they're going to skewer this idiot they've hired. And, which side they butter him on to put him, roast him over the flames, because that really isn't much of a negotiation.
Right.
So this kind of stuff happens in firms where someone's being schmoozed, someone's being kept, being made special, but the downturn effect is that you start sticking those numbers in a spreadsheet for how many copies you've got, and you start realizing that that's a lot of money. And as I think I said at the start, there's a lot of firms telling me they spend 60 to 70% of their entire IT budget currently with one vendor, and that's only increased over the last 10, 15 years. And at some point, it will absorb 100% of their IT budget, which means they couldn't even buy a workstation. So it's there is a limit, and that there is this other thing that people are worried, that people I talk to are worried about, which is when Autodesk, they went from perpetual to subscription. As part of that, they gave you 2 copies at half price for the same as one copy of perpetual, which was a bloody good deal, and it lasted 8 years, which is coming out in the future. Forget it. Don't worry about it. A lot of those companies still have people who signed up that deal, and they're still in that company, and they know that that's not too far in the distance now. I think it's like 4 years away, maybe some or less. And so they know that they're expecting to see a tsunami of requests for payment for normal, because they've used the software and they've enjoyed the bargain that they had for 8 years. But how about increasing your payments by 50%? Which I'm sure they'll come up with some deals at the time, but that is a bomb that is in the system that a lot of large firms are very aware of, and they're trying to work out strategies to not be in that receiving end. And some of that might be changing to cheaper 2D drafting tools. Maybe it's taking maybe having more of the IT in-house, so not necessarily relying on their servers to store stuff and those kind of servicey kind of things. Revit, I think it's still way too early for anybody to think about moving off. It's not, that's just not feasible. I think there's these people will know that they've got a problem that they're going to have to deal with, and what can they do about it? And it was a genius move. I mean, that was out of anything in terms of pricing. It definitely got a lot of people to move from perpetual into subscription. You definitely got a big benefit. I mean, you got I think it's probably the first time that Autodesk customers' spend has actually gone down in terms of what they've got for their money. They've actually seen quite a significant increase. But yeah, this is all built in, and you're going to see competitors trying to utilize that as a sales tactic over the next couple of years as well. Well, not immediately, but yeah. So I think, was there any other kind of topic areas? I think with the show itself, it really is starting. I'm starting to think about speakers. The structure of dev, I have to think about a little bit more. One of the things I kind of threw in as a nice idea, but I thought it worked. So I love Eric de Kaiser. I love Moritz Luck. And the idea was that I wanted to have software developers that had succeeded. So these are people who had been there, been through the mill, developed, had mission creep, success, failure, success, sold out, so that we could have people there who were inspirational, but also could share their knowledge of how they got bitten on the bum through their journey, and also the positives and negatives, how they worked with money people and all that kind of stuff. And the first one I had up was Eric, and he did a brilliant job. I was actually in tears because it's a bit like the story from Monty Python where he said, "Oh, this castle, I built the first castle, it caught fire, and then so I built it out of stone, it caught fire, fell over, so I built the third one, that caught fire, fell over, exploded." That. So Eric had this kind of story of he created Triforma, he signed a deal with Bentley sold it, Bentley were going to buy it, then he obviously didn't have a great well-written contract with Bentley. They walked off with it. So then he started BricsCAD. He then went public, had an IPO. He thought, I'm in the money, I'm brilliant. Then there was a market crash. Then the company crashed. He was in huge amounts of debt. He actually had to go into the bank and say, I can't afford to pay this money back. The only way I can is if I start again. Will you back me? And so they backed him. And so he started again. And he had all these people working for him who, this crew in BricsCAD, they're like family to him. And that came across in that talk that these people were family, and everybody took pay cuts whatever, and they helped and they grew it. And eventually, they sold out to Hexagon, and we have a happy ending. But Eric will never stop. So he started again. He was never happy that he didn't do the architectural tool that he thinks he should have done. So thus Conic starts, and he's loaned his own money to the company. He's not really necessarily in it for his personal gain. He says it's my team's, this team's, this is their company, this is their opportunity. And what I've seen, they've done a bloody good job of it, but it's still he's refusing to have any investment money, and he's totally bootstrapping it. And so they're going to come out after 2 years of development with something they've completely paid for themselves, and then they can go and get maybe some VC money to crack it up. But it was just a beautiful story, and the kind of person that is attracted to be in this industry, who, every time they get knocked down, gets back up and just is, passionate about what he does. And then you have Moritz at the other end of the scale, who, he came out of college and, wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, and then he had to get some investment money, and then they started this company, and eventually, there were ups and downs, and then eventually they sell out, and so now Moritz is kind of an angel investor in our space. And the only thing is the video is not online because he wasn't particularly kind to some of his investors, and he thought that wasn't very polite. So that's not available. But on the day, I think I'm going to do that again, is have people who've been in this industry who can share their knowledge and their story. And hopefully, I think it's interesting for me as a journalist. It's interesting for users. It's interesting for developers. VCs probably not so much, but I love some of the people in this industry, and they give. They are always up for giving and hearing and listening, and especially to obviously customers. And I think that it's only fitting that we can, be proud of some of the software developers that have come up. Even like Jesse Devitt as well as another one. He's obviously probably one of the most famous VCs in the industry, but he kind of came up, sold his software, went into Autodesk. There's loads of these people that I'd love to have to share their experiences and put some warning signs.
Right.
I've had people contact me who want to talk to these people, not necessarily they don't want money from them, they don't want that, they just want to get some advice, or they just want to have that connection, because people worry so much about when you start a business, and it's just that happened to me, so I really wasn't too. I was working for this company. They wanted me to buy it. I kind of gone as staff editor, and I was running it for some retirees, this publishing house, and they said, "Oh, you now need to buy it off us for £1 million or whatever." And I was like, "No." And I went to see some of my friends in the city, and they just went, you know what? Yeah, well, there's no assets. It's like human beings. There's nothing. Don't even think about it. You're an idiot. And then I was at an event in Arizona, and I was talking to Bob McNeil. Bob said, "Oh, how much do you think you need to start up?" I said, "Oh, I don't know, 300,000 or something like that." But, yeah, you got it. I went, "What?" He went, "No, you got it." I thought, we believe in you, and you have to pay. You only no interest, pay it back when you can. And I didn't take it because it's Bob, and I thought, oh, he's a friend. But the actual thing that came out of it was that he gave me enough belief in myself then that if he thinks I can do it, maybe this can be done. And so, stuff transpired at the other end of it, and we found out a different way of doing it. But it was really, these are the kind of people that are in our industry. There are absolute gold nuggets. And if I can attract these people to come to this event, the people that I pre-qualify and say, these people are good people, then, it makes the events worth so much more. I mean, like Jake Leisha, I've known Jay for decades, and he is the Wall Street analyst who goes to nearly every single event. He's the only one who goes to every single event. He thoughtfully listens and knows what's going down. He's a wealth of information, and I couldn't believe that he was willing to come and give a conversation,
really
give a talk
insightful.
at my event.
Really interesting to watch.
He's so sharp. And then I had some people from software firms saying, you just don't want Jay. He's just going to talk about, Autodesk and this and that. And I said, no. I've asked Jay some very specific things, and these are the kind of things he's covered. And these people were some of the first people to run up to him after the event and ask him for copies of the slides, because it's like, idiots. So he's a great friend to have on board, and he's very, very closely linked to a lot of these software companies, and he's got some soft power to try and make them understand that you might need happy customers. You know what I mean? So Wall Street soft power is a nice thing to have, it turns out. But yeah.
Well, Martyn, I feel like this has been a marathon conversation about the state of the industry from an AEC tech perspective, but beyond that. And so,
I honestly, these kind of things are great because I don't really have a very structured mind. I'm non-linear, and it's just putting me in the right direction. And there's a constant sort of, there are all these ideas, but they're not necessarily in any particular order. And these things force me to create a story, or to actually connect these pieces together. And it's pretty much what I do when I write an article, to be honest. But it's sometimes I'll just start a tape player going, and I'll talk about what it is that I want to say, because sometimes you have to fight.
And then you'll take all that text and you put it into ChatGPT and you have it write your article.
I haven't got that done yet. I do put it into something called Otter AI, which then converts text. And Revit always comes out as Rabbit. It hasn't really replaced. But yeah, I did do one thing. I put a note. I said, write an article in the style of Martyn Day from AEC magazine, and I put in the URL on why customers aren't happy when license models change. And I did a 500-word article that was pretty good. I found that it's normally too positive for my liking, but it strips.
Well, see,
that
then
out.
you have to just change the tone. You just say tone a little more negative. Yeah.
There was no positivity in it. I was quite proud of it. But
Well, you're not worried about your job yet, so that's good.
Well, I'm very fortunate that I write about things that don't exist yet, or I write about things that aren't in the public domain yet. So, a lot of that stuff that was shown at Dev wasn't available. So unless AI needs stuff to get trained on, it can't get trained on
That's
stuff
not there.
that's not
Yeah,
really written
true.
about yet. That's my hope.
Well, this has been a fun conversation. Like I said, we've gone around the world a few
Yeah.
times, so I look forward to doing it again. Though I know you've got your hands full with these conferences, and I think though that such important content comes out of those, and if I can help
Yeah.
keep that momentum going, I think that's important. So happy to do
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, I'll definitely keep you up to date, because I think I'm gonna start a bit of a brains trust to get topic areas that need to have a light shone on them. And if I don't get them in a dev or build, then it's something that maybe I can write about. But maybe it could be something that, through your medium, then I don't know how many people you can have on the air, but I think it's always good to have, we could do a sort of like a club
Right.
session, have a topic, and have three or four people. You don't really want any more than that, to drill down and make it a special
Right.
thing, and then go with that. And it'd be great to have people from different continents, because the one thing that I am aware of, is that the different countries have different views, and then you need to find someone in America who's willing to step on a rattlesnake
Right.
and say
Right.
some stuff. And they're out there. They're all there, but they might not necessarily have the blessing of the
Right.
board.
Right.
Is
Well, I appreciate your time. This has been fun, and I look
Yeah.
forward to another time. Let's do it again.
definitely. Cheers. Thanks, Evan.